Welcome to Let's Be Well Together podcast. We're your wellness check-in team. We talk about different categories of wellness and seeking balance between them. It all stems from my book, Accidentally Well. And there's overview info on our website, letsbewelltogether.com.
This is episode 14.
And here we are. It's Sheila and Sammy. Yeah. We are here to talk about the giver syndrome. So have you heard about this, Sammy?
I haven't heard about it, but I hear it and I'm like, I think that's me.
Yes, I think that's me too.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot of women have the giver syndrome. So I was reading this book. Well, I wasn't reading it. It was on Audible. So I was listening to this book called Burnout. And they were talking about different barriers you need to overcome to achieve wellness, etc. And the giver syndrome came up, and I thought that was very interesting because a lot of women do have this issue. And the giver syndrome, basically, like really basic, is that some people are human givers and other people are human beings. So it's kind of general because it's saying that we're not all human beings, but you know what I mean? So basically the human givers are expected to give like their time, their money, their love, and the human beings are just expected to be their best beings and like to be their best selves, and that they need us to do that.
Right.
Or we at least think they need us to do that.
Right.
So, and in being a human giver, we always feel like we have to be pretty and happy and calm and generous and attentive to their needs and et cetera. And so you don't ever want to be ugly or angry or upset or even ambitious or think about your own needs.
Right. Yeah, I hear that and I'm like,
yes,
I can very much relate to that. And that's something like David will tell me all the time, like, you should focus more on yourself.
Yes.
Like you give so much to other people, and I will get like very anxious when I don't have that time for myself or when I'm not thinking about my own needs and I'm just constantly thinking of what's the best for everybody else. Like I'll do whatever everybody's gonna be happy doing, right? Like who wants to pick the dinner? I don't care where we go as long as like
everybody's happy.
Yeah, there's no fights, there's no anxiety, like you know, there's no tension.
Yes.
Always just trying to make everybody happy over myself, even if it's like something I really don't want to do or shouldn't be doing. Right. You know?
Yes. No, I agree. Yes, definitely. I mean, as a mother, like women, it's almost expected of us.
Yeah.
But to worry about how we look is, you know, that's irritating.
So irritating.
That we have to, I have to look good. I don't want to, I have to be happy all the time.
Yeah. Even if you think of like serving and stuff, like they would get like just regulars, like, why aren't you smiling? Like smile more for me. Like,
what's wrong?
Oh, you look so good today. Like, you know, like your money is made off of how you're looking and acting, right? So if I'm like an upset, you know, being really rude to people, even when they're being rude to me, like if I'm rude to them back, like that affects your pay as a server, right? So yeah, there's so many things that so I was just thinking, like, because I do enjoy it. Like I am a giver and I do like making people happy, and I like, you know, the outcome, and it does bring joy to my life. But I just have to put myself in one of the groups of people you have to make happy. Yes.
You know, like just include yourself and give yourself some time.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I find too, I'm similar where like, I really enjoy making other people happy. And I think it's because I feed off of other people's energies. Yes. So when they're happy, I'm happy. And when they're like angry or upset, like I feel it.
The
and
tension,
I'm just so much. And it kind of like weighs really heavily on me. So I'd rather just make everybody happy. Yeah. Even though it might not be the best scenario for yourself.
Yes.
But yeah, definitely important to put yourself in that.
Put yourself in that. Yeah. To make happy too. Yeah. And I just was like, do we put this on ourselves? Is this a nature or a nurture? Like, is it what society expects from women in general? Yeah. Or is it what we expect from ourselves? Or like, I'm like, I don't know. I think it's both.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I would say a lot of it does come from societal. Yeah. Like I'm sure there's a lot of like just that nurturing tendency of like you're a mother or you're a female and you're kind of like, that's just like our nature. But as like in the society we live in, if you think of like movies, up until maybe recently, there wasn't a lot of like strong lead female characters, and a lot of now like female actresses are like I want to play like only a strong female. I don't want to play the supporting female that's just there to give
support to the human being.
Man. Yeah, to the man on the screen, right? And making sure that they look good and that I'm their love interest or whatever, right? Yes. So I think it is something that's just kind of like
starting to click.
Yeah, and it's just like in our like wired in our brains from seeing all this stuff in childhood, right?
Yeah, and on TV and on commercials and on, you know, and in life.
Like parents, like older generations, that was kind of like their role. Like the women were for the kitchen and the men were for work, right? So
I think it's both. Nature and nurture.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess like something to think about now is like, what can we do as givers to maybe like put ourselves in that category? Like what we're saying. Something that pops into my head would be like saying no.
Yes.
When I'm like anxious or when I have too much on my plate, saying no, and that it's okay to set that boundary.
Yes, I know, but you feel guilty again. This whole you can't, you know, this guilty. It's the guilt, and we put that on ourselves. But
we do, yeah.
But
also,
I can totally do that because I never say no.
Yeah, and I think like society puts that on us, right? Like I don't think it's just us putting that on ourselves, but it's like when you're a giver, everybody in your circle expects you to just give.
Yes.
So when you start laying those boundaries, they might think like, oh, like Sheila's being really rude. She's not doing what I want her to do. It's like, no, Sheila's setting a boundary.
Yes.
And it's okay to set boundaries. That's something that's like I'm constantly working and talking about with my friends of like where can we set boundaries like in our life? If we're anxious about something, we're like very big on boundary talk. That's our main like set those boundaries. Like it's a very big thing.
Oh,
I feel like
good.
for my generation right now.
Yes.
Everybody's talking about boundaries.
Yes, that's for sure. Because people do expect you to be, you know, to respond immediately and to, you know, they get upset if they can't get a hold of you. And it's like, you got to set boundaries. Like, I don't think I should be available all the time to, you know, everybody.
And I think that's important also in work.
Yes.
Like, work is somewhere where if you are a giver, like people will take as much as, you know, I've been in previous positions of like where I was just stretched to my like thinnest. I was just trying to do everything and make everybody happy while like constantly affecting my own mental health. And it's important to know like it's okay to set those boundaries at work too.
Yes.
Right. And that's really hard because
it is really hard. You're already stretched and then they ask you and you're like, oh, okay.
You're like, well, I don't want to get a bad review or I don't want to like, you know, not have a good or contact upset for later.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So you need to say no. That's a good start.
No. Need to say no.
And I think another thing that is something we could do is ask for help.
Yes.
You know, like I don't ask for help very often. I'm like, no, I'm Superwoman. Yeah. I can do it all.
Yeah.
But I was like, you know what? Maybe I can do it all, but like it will come back to haunt you, I think.
For sure. Yeah. And asking for help shouldn't be a weakness.
No.
It should be like, I'm leaning on my community. I'm leaning on my people to be there for me.
And it's just in that aspect of giving, you know, like you're doing it all. You know, you don't have to do it all. Like pull back a little bit and let other people do things. Yeah. But in that, you might have to ask.
You might have to ask because when you are that person that's constantly doing things, people just expect it from you.
Yes.
So they might not think like you need help.
No.
They're like, oh, no. Like they've got it. Yeah. But it's like, so once you start asking that, maybe then people in your circle will be like, hey, like, do you need any help with that? Yeah. And then it will become a little bit easier to accept the help.
Or they'll take over roles that, you know, that they think they can handle. That would be nice too. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. There's a lot of things that, you know, people can do and asking for help and not seeing it as like, you can't do everything.
Yeah.
It's like a thing.
That you shouldn't. You don't have to do everything.
You don't have to. Definitely don't have to do everything.
You don't have to.
Yeah.
And that's it. So think about yourself in the giving aspect when you're, if you're a human giver.
Yeah. And remember to put yourself first.
Guests are giving their time, expanding our minds. Our interview tonight is in the area of mental wellness. I am interviewing Elisa Brewer-Singh, who is with the Waterloo Region Suicide Prevention Council. Elisa is the executive director, and she brings her passion for suicide prevention and a master's degree in spiritual care and counseling from the Wilfrid Laurier University, which she uses to support the dialogue around suicide, advocate for better access to services and supports, and journey alongside individuals bereaved by suicide. Elisa's work includes a regional, provincial, and national focus on providing hope, help, and healing for those who have been touched by suicide. Her desire is to see communities where everyone is engaged in the work of suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention. Hope, help, and healing. Outside of her work, she enjoys spending time with her family, including her husband, 2 sons, and dog, and can often be found listening to music, playing board games, or reading a good book. And Elisa, I'd like to start with an overview about the Waterloo Region Suicide Prevention Council. I understand it's a community-based nonprofit that aims to increase awareness of and engagement in suicide prevention within our community. And the ultimate goal is to reduce suicide and its impact. Can you please tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So first and foremost, just thank you for having me on and contributing to this really important dialogue and conversation. So the WSPC has been part of our community since 1997. We serve as really a touchstone within the community, and our work falls under 3 key areas that we often refer to, as you mentioned, as hope, help, and healing. And so hope is really that sort of upstream community-focused prevention work, which includes the distribution of educational brochures, awareness presentations within the community, so to workplaces, within the schools as well. When we talk about the work of help, this is really the work for when individuals are struggling. So our work in this area includes education, it includes training and awareness activities that teach individuals, how to recognize when someone is struggling and how to get help. And then the work of healing really supports that healing journey. So our work in this particular area is focused in on suicide bereavement. And we offer resources as well as a 10-week suicide bereavement support group for those who have lost a loved one to suicide.
I saw that on your website you provide a really great amount of information, and that website address for people who want to look into it is wrspc.ca. You were mentioning before that there's information that you often convey when we start a discussion like this.
Yeah, one thing we often say to individuals, just as we begin this conversation, is that, we do recognize that sometimes this topic may feel heavy. It may bring up a variety of emotions that perhaps you weren't even expecting. So we just remind everyone that there are organizations that are available to provide support, whether it's for yourself, whether it's for a loved one or a friend. And if they're struggling, we encourage you to reach out to some of these supports. And so, locally in Kitchener-Waterloo, we have Here 24/7, but there's also the Canada Suicide Prevention Service, and they're available 24/7 and can be reached at 1-833-456-4566.
I think you said Here 24/7. I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah, Here 24/7 is a crisis support here in Waterloo Region that is offered through CMHA Waterloo Wellington. It is our 24-hour crisis support, but it's also the sort of entry point for all of adult mental health services. And so you can connect with them at any time. And their number is 1-844-437-3247.
Another useful document that you provided to me, we won't cover it really in this show, but I was reading it and it was quite helpful. And it talks about language, and it's called Language Matters, Safe Language and Messages for Suicide Prevention. If you do a search on the internet for that, you will find something on the Government of Canada website. So that's another useful resource. As with many of our guests, I think this is probably going to be the start of a discussion. With 15-minute interviews, there's so much to cover and obviously not enough time in one interview. So today we're going to cover some points, and I'm hoping to start with the question, why raise awareness about suicide? Many people don't like to talk about it. Many people, there's myths associated. In your experience, what are the benefits of raising awareness?
Yeah, so there's several benefits really to just having this conversation, to having conversations exactly like this. Part of that is really this opportunity encourages the dialogue, which allows us, whether it's to open up about our own mental health concerns, Whether it encourages us to check up on some individuals that we may perhaps be worried or concerned about. It encourages us really to reach out to some professionals when we do need some help. It also helps sort of attune us to or recognize, perhaps some of the signs of struggle in ourselves and in those around us, sort of that commonality that we all do struggle. And so in recognizing that commonality, we help to reduce a little bit of the stigma attached. Really, I think the largest benefit is just we recognize that we can have these conversations, that we have to have these conversations.
I'm hearing so we've been talking to guests in different areas associated with mental health, and the theme that's starting to come through loud and clear, there's a few, but a couple are that we need to normalize discussion on these type of topics. And in doing that, that helps to reduce the stigma. It helps to, for example, remove some of the misunderstandings and myths. Another thing I wonder about is funding. I know that there doesn't seem to be enough resources in this area. It's talking about this subject matter. Would you think that might help in any way to help get some funding?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's talking about some of the programs that are available and, what are the resources that are available to the community. Sometimes it's, that the community just perhaps doesn't know that they're available. And in having those conversations, we look at how we can expand those out further. And in some ways that does mean that it brings some funding to us. And in others, it allows us to do some additional collaborations that perhaps we hadn't in the past or hadn't had the opportunity to explore. So it absolutely opens that dialogue as well.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of good reasons to raise awareness. So it's good that we're talking. And another thing you did is, I looked at your website, and again, I just want to emphasize how much useful information is up there. You also provided me with resource material. And a big theme in the material you provided was highlighting the importance of language when talking about suicide. That's something I hadn't really considered. Let's just start, though, before we get into that kind of stuff, on what would you say would be the working definition or common understanding of suicide?
Yeah, so when we're talking about suicide, a really common definition that is really often shared is that suicide is an attempt to solve a problem of intense emotional pain, but with impaired problem-solving skills. And so, when we think about it this way, when we better articulate that sort of deep psychological pain, for some, that feeling of burdensomeness, or that intense emotional pain, when we talk about this, then we have a greater understanding of how that can constrict an individual's field of vision. Oftentimes, if I'm doing presentations, I talk about it almost as if a narrowed vision. And so in this moment, when we have this conversation about that, we start to have the conversation about how can we support an individual to open up their field of vision. How do they begin to think about the possibilities of support? And it also allows us to recognize that suicide itself is very complex. Nothing causes suicide, but it does emerge from an interaction of several risk factors. And so, it just changes the conversation.
You said it so well. There's other times in mental health issues when I'm talking to people where they talk about making decisions in a particular frame of mind, and that frame of mind is affecting the decisions, and it's the wrong time to make the decisions. And I can imagine how serious that can be. Tell us a little bit about some of the language issues that we should think about, maybe some terms to avoid, even if we can't get through all of them. What are some of the keys that we need to think about?
Yeah, so certainly what we've, the work over the last several years is really shifting to, people first and neutral language. And so, some of the phrases that we may have heard in the past may have been, commit suicide, which really, though, it has become an outdated phrase. Oftentimes it sort of implied a moral failing. And instead, we've really shifted that language to died by suicide, which is judgment neutral. Things like an unsuccessful attempt or a failed attempt, when we're talking about a suicide attempt, it implies, that there was something left to finish, or that they've failed. And so we've shifted this language. We've shifted the way we also talk about suicide. We're very aware of a trauma-informed lens now, so we're not talking about suicide methods. We're really avoiding sort of this romanticization or glorifying of suicide. And instead, we, again, go back to that idea that it is really complex. It's multifaceted. And I think, the important messaging being that suicide can be prevented. What I will say as part of that, I always sort of include this caveat that, this is about shifting our language. It's about being intentional, but I would never want that to hinder a conversation, that someone became so worried about what do they say that they instead just don't say anything. And so again, it's really about, shifting and being intentional.
That's a great point. We heard that in a different interview in a different context. It's the point being substance over form. I mean, be careful with the words, but it's not a matter of putting things in boxes and pigeonholing for that reason. What are some of the more general myths and facts associated with suicide?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a number of myths that still exist around the conversation of suicide. But I think for myself, there's sort of three that we often talk about, or we share about. And so, the first one, which can often hinder a conversation, is that talking about suicide will give an individual the idea to consider suicide. And that is a myth. We know that talking about suicide does not cause someone to think about suicide. In fact, we know that, talking about suicide, especially very openly, often gives an individual an opportunity to speak openly about it as well. They can share what's going on. And in turn, in asking that question, it demonstrates that you genuinely care about them. So that process, again, I think, we hear the word stigma a lot, but this is about, how do we promote help seeking and help offering, that idea that we all kind of have a role to play. And so, one of the other myths that we often hear is that suicides occur without warning. And I think this can be probably one of the most difficult myths because, suicidal behavior itself is seen as very impulsive. But most often, and I do say most often, there have been prior warning signs, or, as we like to call them, it's actually an invitation for help.
And if you can believe it, we're getting close to the end of our time. Maybe what we could do is could you let us know what, in the experience of your organization, some of these warning signs are?
Yeah, certainly. So generally speaking, an invitation for help may look like a lack of interest in usual activities. So if you have a sport or a club and an individual or a friend has not, been attending, that may be an invitation for help. An invitation that you may hear might be, saying, I feel helpless, or I feel like a burden. And then the other indication might be a change. Like, we're looking for a change in that individual. So perhaps it's, that they're more irritable, that they've, there's been a change in their appetite, a change in their sleep, their overall affect. So some of these are some invitations that would encourage you to start and continue a further dialogue.
Next time, so we're kind of getting to the end of this episode, but I'm so glad that you said you can come back, and next time we can talk a little bit more about the kind of things that you might do if you want to look for help yourself, or if you know somebody who might need some help, what they'll be able to do. I didn't want to cut you off though. Was there anything else in terms of warning signs that you wanted to cover?
No, that was, I think those are some of them. Again, I think the important piece is just that it's a change in behavior. So it's something that's outside of the norm for that individual. As much as we would love this to be, a checklist or a box, we're looking for something that's just out of the ordinary for that individual.
Well, we certainly appreciate your work in this area. You're helping people in a difficult situation, and it's to be applauded. So thanks very much for that.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay.
Welcome back to another installment of the Adventures of the Starving Artist, and today is a special adventure with the Starving Artists. because I have my friend Charles joining me today. Charles, it's good to have you here, man.
Good to be here, Cameron. I'm excited. I've been looking forward to this.
Me too, man. Thank you for taking the time. The keen listeners among you might remember Charles from some earlier segments. I've mentioned him before, some of the collaborative stuff we've gotten up to. We've performed together in the past, back in school days. Charles, really great to have you here, my friend. I was hoping you could tell everybody here a little bit about what you do.
Sure, I can do that. So, hi everyone. I'm Charles. I'm a mixing engineer. So, I used to work exclusively in the like the progressive rock and metal genres, but right now I work with artists and producers in the pop, rock, and acoustic singer-songwriter genres. Occasionally, I produce when I feel like I can bring something to the table, but that's more rare. It's a longer commitment, that one.
So Charles has been working on a number of cool projects lately, and I've been following along. One of our other friends from school, Max, has been putting out an album that's going to be rock and roll that Charles has been working on. Can you tell us some more about that one, Charles?
Yeah, so I can tell you actually how it came about, because it's quite funny. I think it was 2 weeks ago, and I just finished mixing a friend of mine's orchestral portfolio. And it culminated in me being able to mix 7 of those songs in a day, which was a new record for me, and I was quite proud of it.
Yeah.
And then I put on my Instagram story. I was feeling a little bit cocky, so I put on my Instagram story, just finished up mixing 7 songs in a day. Someone send me an album so I can beat my record. And then the next morning, I got this message from Max saying something like, "Hey, like, how long do you think it would take you to do a 9-song album?" I think it was about, I don't know, 8 in the morning. I literally just texted him saying, like, "Can we call? Like, texting is too much." And that's how it came about. We talked for a few minutes, and then I was hired, basically.
Pretty cool. Always good when a gig rolls into your lap like that. But beating 7 songs to mix in a day. So for the uninitiated, to mix a song, it is a heck of a process, and it can be very time consuming. Oftentimes there are many revisions. To do even 1 song in a day, that's no small feat. So to do 7, very impressive. And then to beat that record or work towards beating that record, man, I couldn't do it. Good on you.
Like, I should preface that by saying, before the actual mixing portion, which I like to do quite fast, there is a lot of prep work that goes into it. So making sure everything, well, in the case of the orchestral track, so it's making sure everything was programmed correctly. So I'd kind of have to do minimal work on the mixing. Part of what helped with mixing those orchestral tracks is that it was all with the same sound library, which was the BBC Symphony Orchestra library. So, once I got the settings right, once I got them the best they could for 1 song, it was easy to copy those over and then just adapt per song.
Yeah, almost like a template. Yeah.
It is. It's exactly a template. That's what it is.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Obviously, Charles is very busy with work. It was interesting because, and the reason I wanted to have you on in the segment is at the beginning of this year, when you and I first sort of reconnected and got back in touch, you said something to me that has stuck with me since, that I've been taking with me every day. And that is, I want this year to be the year of getting it done. And so far, man, it sounds like you really have been getting it done. You're starting up your very own business with your services that you offer. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. 2021, I feel, was, I think, like everyone's worst year.
Yeah, it definitely up there, man.
Yeah. Last year, like, as well as because I used to be a teacher after I graduated from Berkeley in 2018, and then I was teaching during the year, like the first lockdown happened, and that all culminated in basically becoming way too stressed at that job. And I left that in April of 2021, last year, and then I spent a long time like dealing with a lot of personal stuff and really not moving anywhere. So it came to October and I decided, what, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to, go from full-time salaried to freelancing with 0 clients, which I was very naive to think I could do at first, I said, what, I need some help. If I'm going to do this, I need help to get my sorted out.
Yeah. And that's huge,
that's
man.
When I sought after a business coach who's called Vincent Hervey. I'll shout him out because he's awesome, Vincent Hervey.
Right on.
And him and the business group that I'm a part of being part of that has really helped me in into getting where I am now. really learning about the mindset of being an entrepreneur and trying to get something going and actually like realizing what I'm worth and charging what I'm worth. That's like, financial stuff is one thing, but actually feeling that I am worth like the skills that I offer.
It's interesting you say that, because I struggle with that same sentiment. It can be hard to pin a number to that, especially in a field such as music, because at the end of the day, we're here for the art part, or at least I am. I think you are too. And so, it can be really hard to attach a monetary value to an artistic endeavor, but at the end of the day, you have to eat. So I'm with you there, man. True. It's a bit of a struggle.
It is. And, it's, it is difficult to like put a number on that. Like, as much as we like to do the art, it like the way I like to think of it is, so we are all artists, but, making money from it, it's nice too.
Yeah.
Like that's the kind of way I think of it. Like I come for the people and the music first, and by the way, I charge this.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
That's a good headspace to be in for that, I think.
Yeah, it's always better to be a people person, which is something I really wasn't for a long part of my life, and it was really only in the last few months that I've kind of understood what that means. And I think going into lockdown and going through COVID, that sort of pushed me further into myself, and then just coming out of that on the other side has been a really nice experience.
Yeah, man. What keeps popping into my mind is you're describing how that retreat into yourself is caterpillar, chrysalis, butterfly thing. You know what I'm saying? That metamorphosis of change. I think that's really great, Charles. If you had to boil it down to one thought, one phrase to go from retreating within yourself to pushing out, doing your thing, and doing it with confidence to say, yes, this is what I'm here to do. This is how much it's going to cost you, and you're going to get the best product you could get. What would you say if you had to boil it down?
If I had to boil it down to kind of like one thing that I guess like accelerated my growth, maybe?
Yeah, whether it was a catalyst or even a hurdle. One thing
okay, no, that's true. I'd say don't rush.
Don't rush.
Every time I've tried to rush anything, it's backfired on me, because like, for example, talking to a potential client, trying to get them on side, or trying to reach my financial goals for the week or the month, or, trying to meet daily stuff. And I'll try to rush them, and it would always backfire, because I would feel frustrated if things weren't going as fast as I wanted. And then I would beat myself up about it. So, playing the long game, and understanding it's really going to take time. So yeah.
I like that. Don't rush. It's going to take time.
You have way more time than you think.
Yeah. It's not so much about the destination as it is about the journey, as they say, right?
Exactly.
Very cool. Charles, thank you so much for joining me today. Juggling the time change and all that stuff. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here, man.
It's been awesome, Cameron. Thank you for having me on.
Right on. This has been another installment of The Adventures of the Starving Artist, featuring Charles. Charles, I'm sure we could figure out a way to shout out your socials. Is there a quick and easy way people can find you if they want to check out your work?
Yeah. So I mainly hang out on Instagram. So it's literally at Charles Henry Volk, all one word. And if you want to go to my website, it's charleshenryvolk.com. The best way to find out what I'm all about is to message me on Instagram. And please feel free to. I'm happy to talk to new people.
Right on. You heard it here first. That's at Charles Henry Volk, Volk like Volkswagen, on Instagram. Right on. Thank you all so much for listening. I'm Cameron. This is The Starving Artist. Until next time.
Hi everyone, we can use your help. Without getting into a boring technical talk, it's challenging for us to figure out how many people are listening. We could use your help in a couple ways. First, to give us a sense of who's listening, please follow our Instagram account. It's at lets.be.well.together. Second, follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We'd really appreciate your help here. Also, we'd really love to hear from people. Right now, it feels a bit like we're broadcasting into space. We send out our signal and don't hear even an echo. We'd love to hear whether you're getting something out of this, whether you've been inspired to do something for yourself, whether one of our guests said something that connected with you. So please drop some comments on our Instagram account. We hope you're enjoying the show, and if so, please spread the word about us.
Move that body like we're meant to do.
This is Move Your Body, and we're going to talk about nighttime snacking.
You mean, Julie, that I'm allowed to snack at night? Is that what we're going to talk about?
That's one of my... I struggle with that right now, John.
I know. And so a lot of times we have someone, like when Sammy's here, we got the intergenerational thing, but you and I are kind of on the older end of the spectrum.
And I'm not going to tell people how old I am, but I tell you, John, these days I look at food and I put on weight. And one of my biggest challenges is nighttime snacking. Candies, chips, you name it. And, I get hungry at night. And it's not good because you go to bed and you feel horrible and you wake up feeling horrible. Have you got some tips, tricks?
I can tell you that from my own personal experience, that is the whole key to weight loss. The whole key to weight loss is what happens after supper. That's for me, because I don't know why it is. So I'm just saying, again, from my perspective, I get up, I can eat breakfast properly. I have my morning snack. I have an apple around 10 o'clock. I have a healthy lunch. I have another snack or two in the afternoon, really healthy ones. And then that staves off super hunger for dinner. So then when I have dinner, I'm good at dinner. I eat what I'm supposed to. And then everything goes wrong. And
exactly.
So I do have something that I found, and it worked. So, again, my story is that I lost a lot of weight, gained it, lost it. And finally, I'm at the right place. And so, woohoo, I made it to the right place. Well, the truth is COVID hasn't worked very well for me. And I have been really struggling after dinner. And even though what used to be, so my old snacks used to be terrible, like a whole bunch of chips, big bowl of ice cream,
yes,
peanut butter sandwiches.
Things that we shouldn't have in the fridge.
But now, even though my terrible snacking is a handful of peanuts and raisins or something else,
still calories.
I'm putting on weight. So it's terrible. But here's what works for me. It doesn't work for Sheila because she hates tea. But what I found was if I could hold myself out till about 8:15, 8:30 at night,
okay.
I started experimenting with different things. So I was trying different things. The key is you don't want calories and you don't want caffeine.
Right.
And so I found some herbal teas that were really good. You go to the stores and they have these different herbal tea stores. The first one I found that I really liked, which was a spiced apple. They don't make it anymore. I found these herbal teas, and if for whatever reason, the process of making it around 8:15 or 8:30 and then waiting for it to cool down and then sipping on it, because you can't just drink it right back.
Yeah.
By the time I finished it, 9 o'clock or whatever it was, just before 9, it was just enough to get me over the hump. And then for whatever reason, I could then make it to bed without snacking. And if I did that, I would wake up in the morning feeling amazing. Yeah. Because my supper, which was healthy, would have digested in a good way and turned to energy and energized me, versus if I snacked at night, I'd wake up feeling, I don't know, just kind of junky.
Exactly.
I'd feel, I just didn't have that energy.
You don't feel good. No.
So that's what I got to get back to. So,
but there's a procedure, right? That's, I think that's part of a routine as well, getting into a routine. But sometimes it takes a while to develop that routine, right? And I find those few days of just getting over that hump of, okay, let's develop this routine of making my tea every night. And
but it's at the end of the day, Julie, it's discipline. It really is about discipline, and it's hard.
Yes.
And so at times over COVID, I would get back to doing that. And I don't know what it is. I have to make that tea. That's my crutch now. I think each of us could come up with our own crutch. Yeah. Something that's healthy. Drinking water is really helpful as well. Even some people don't like tea, but they like hot water. I can't drink coffee because of the caffeine. Some people like decaf. I don't. Mm-hmm. But if there's something that you can find that doesn't have calories, but keeps you occupied for that little bit of time, otherwise you just have to suffer through it. Because for me, the biggest key to either losing weight or keeping weight off is not eating after supper.
Well, I like your point and I like your tip. I'm going to give that a try.
There's a thought. Popped up while running. Sometimes I get caught up pretty much splitting hairs when it comes to words. It's hard to avoid that when you were trained as a philosopher and a lawyer. You kind of get caught up on words sometimes. So I try not to do that. I try and look past the words and focus more on the substance. With that context, I don't think I am splitting hairs. There's a word I don't really like to use, and it's pride. It just doesn't feel right to me to say that I'm proud of this or proud of that. Instead, what always comes to my mind is that I'm appreciative. And I don't think I'm splitting hairs. And let me explain. If I think of the word pride, that to me suggests that I'm responsible in the sense that whatever happened, I'm the one who made that happen. And therefore, because I made that happen, I deserve praise. And therefore, I could be proud of it. But with so many of the things that I accomplish, there's so many factors out of my control that there's a lot of luck involved. There's a lot of other people helping. It's really not all about me. It's very, very rarely about me alone. And of course, yeah, sure, I need to have done a good fair bit of the part, but usually there's help coming from other people. And that makes me feel super appreciative as opposed to proud because I did something. And there's a recent example, which was, if you happen to have read my book, you'll have seen that the first official half marathon I did is the Waterloo Half Marathon. And I did it in 2017. And in that year, they changed its name to the Ed Whitlock Half Marathon. Ed Whitlock was an amazing senior runner from Milton, Ontario, who did incredible things. And unfortunately, he passed away just before the 2017 version of the half marathon, and he'd been involved in some of them, so that they named it after him. I felt an amazing sense of accomplishment after I finished that half marathon, and I realized soon after that my life was changing in ways that were incredible, and I really appreciated it. It came into my head that to celebrate that and to celebrate Ed Whitlock, who'd inspired me and who was doing amazing things in his late 70s and even into his 80s, that I would give myself a goal to try and run the first 25 Ed Whitlock half marathons in a row. In order to do that, I'd have to do the race every year until I was 77. And then because of COVID, one of them was canceled. Now it's going to be till 78. And so last year, for example, I was one of only a few people who signed up to do a virtual version of it, and I did it. Then I was training for the 2022 version. Everything was going great, on track. And 11 days before, I got hit with COVID. And luckily, it wasn't that bad. Luckily, it was 11 days before and not 5 days before. It turned out that I had enough time to recover because I'd been vaccinated and boosted. I think that was the main reason. I recovered quite quickly. And so by a few days afterwards, I was already feeling better and I could resume training and I was able to complete the race. I'm sure there's people who in that position, having been able to complete the race soon after that kind of illness, would say, I'm really proud of myself. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I mean, if that's how you feel, that's fantastic. But I'm just saying what I was thinking about today on my run was that's just not how my brain works. For me, I just couldn't help but felt so appreciative of being so lucky that things worked out the way they did. And sure, like I kind of pat myself on the back sometimes for being able to put in the work and grind through long runs and that kind of stuff. But my focus always seems to be on appreciating luck and appreciating help I get from other people. And that makes me feel better than saying I'm proud.
It's me. Yeah. So let me say, flip side of the coin. Hi, everyone.
We are back. I'm jumping in this time.
Oh, hi. No, I'm talking, not you.
Just kidding. You always introduce flip side, which I like.
Well, we know who it is. There we are already arguing.
Well, the good news is we're back talking about one of our favorite subjects, art. And real life changer for me. I can't explain why. I often say that. But
for me as well.
We got, so at a birthday that I won't disclose because I want to be safe.
Right. We could just say 29.
Yeah. And Sheila's 29th birthday.
Thank you.
We had both wanted to go to Paris for a long, long time. It's a dream trip for us.
And there's a whole story in that alone, because when you gave it to me, it was Christmas and my birthday's not till February. And you thought that I already knew all about it, but I didn't.
Why don't I remember anything?
I don't know.
I'm getting so old.
I find that people remember some things. Like, I mean, you need to have a group of people together to piece the stories together because everyone remembers something different.
It's true. Quite a few times on these flip sides, you say something and I'm like, I had no idea. They complete surprise to me. It's a better story.
That's basically our marriage.
Yeah.
But I'm always a complete surprise to you.
Okay. Is that a segue?
No, that's it. We're done.
No, we'll go back to Musée d'Orsay. So anyway, we were only there for a very short time. And we made a mistake. Don't do this. Don't go to the Louvre with jet lag.
Yeah, because we'd landed at like 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. and our hotel wasn't available yet, which was right across the street from the Louvre, which was very nice. So we put our luggage there and then went straight there.
And we were exhausted. And I thought I'd sleep overnight, but I didn't on the plane. And so anyway, that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
But the quick version is so much beautiful art, so many paintings. And at a certain point, I was looking around and there was just filled with art everywhere. And
everywhere.
The most attractive thing to me was the bench.
Yeah.
I wanted to go lay down and go sleep.
And we both sat on that bench and we were like, okay, this isn't good. We're just too tired.
So that was the dumb thing that we did. It didn't work out art-wise.
Don't do that.
But the good news is we went to the Musée d'Orsay. Didn't really know anything about it.
Nothing.
Just somebody said go.
Yeah.
And even now, like Sheila thinks that we heard it after we got to Paris. My kind of hazy recollection is somebody told me before.
Well, my recollection is that we were just on a hunt for baguettes because I wanted to get a baguette and walk around Paris with a baguette. I didn't want to eat it. I just wanted to walk around with it.
That's classic.
And we ran into the Museum d'Orsay. Now, John seems to think that.
Well, I knew I wanted to see it. Somebody told me I should go. And I have the memory I do have is somebody said, when you go to the Musée d'Orsay, go first thing in the morning when it opens and go backwards. So the way it works, usually you go in the first floor and you kind of wind your way up floors, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 floors.
Yeah, I think 4 for some reason, but I don't know.
And so they said there's a back set of stairs, find it, walk up to the top and work your way backwards because then you'll see a lot of the really popular paintings before the crowd hits it.
Yes, because a lot of the popular ones were on top.
Right.
And the main floor was more sculptures and that type of thing.
And the first thing I noticed, which I was just fascinated about, was that we go in the back door and we're hardly there a minute. There's a whole class of kids.
Yes.
I think they looked like 10 years old maybe.
Yeah, very young.
And there was a teacher. They were all sitting on the floor and there was a teacher explaining a piece of art.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, wow, I'm in a different place.
Yes. So do you remember the artists that were painting the art?
Yeah. So I think what you mean is there was artists set up with their little tripods or whatever you call them. And they were painting themselves and they were looking at the art on the wall and they were painting it.
Yeah,
and we thought, what the heck? Isn't that like
illegal or something? But it was so interesting because they were so good. Mm-hmm. Like the artists themselves were just amazing, imitating the style of Van Gogh or this, Picasso or whatever.
But the upshot of it all was that was a few years ago. Won't say how many.
Right.
But it changed my life somehow. I can't explain how. I often find myself thinking about art that I saw there or a feeling that I had there. And I just go to this other place. I feel so good.
I felt like I could almost jump in the pictures. And they were so old. That was the other thing that amazed me is the condition that they're in. Because looking at pictures of art and looking at art is different. And it felt so real.
And I always think of history, you see black and white photos from that time. And so I don't know why in my head, it's kind of like a black and white time.
Yeah.
And that the colors, it was so alive.
So alive and vibrant and singing.
And I think ultimately Van Gogh is definitely one of my favorite artists. And some of the stuff there really stood out. I
really liked the Monets.
Did you?
Oh, yeah. Because when you look at pictures of them, the colors are more subtle because it's subtle. But they were so vibrant and active. There seemed to be parties and happy.
Didn't Monet do the ones kind of with the lily pads and stuff too? That was so real.
Yes.
So anyway, that was an amazing, wonderful trip and another example of art enriching our lives.
Yes.
Please remember, we're not providing advice. We're sharing our experiences and thoughts. We hope to inspire you to think about and foster wellness actively in ways that work for you. We try and get things right, but we can't guarantee everything we say is correct, or the things we talk about will work for you. We urge you to consult with qualified people when you need advice. Let's be well together, and let's be sure to do that in a safe way.
It is sign-off time, and it's John and Sheila again. It seems to be a lot of us on this episode, and unfortunately, we couldn't connect with Sammy this weekend. We were crazy busy.
So really busy.
It was us unable to connect over the weekend and heading into Monday. We've had so much going on.
Yeah. I'm surprised you got it all done, actually.
So, one thing that was really interesting actually this week, and it just goes to show how easy it is to forget the stuff that we keep talking about. Because, so I got hit by COVID and I haven't been running, and I've been stressed out about whether I could do the half marathon. And as I said earlier on the show, I did get it done. So that was really great. But I had other stressful things going on. Everything was building up. And I was talking to a friend who listens to the show, Jennifer.
Right.
And I was saying, I'm not feeling good right now. Like, I'm just not feeling it. And she goes, John, when's the last time you ran?
Right.
And I'm like, of course. She goes, you're not doing the exercise that kind of set all this off. And I'm like, of course. I'm just, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's endorphins or what it is, but
it's everything.
Because I had all this stress going on, and I didn't have my protective factor, which one of the big ones for me is getting out to run 2, 3, 4 times a week. And then, here I am doing all this show saying, get out there, get some exercise, because if you don't, you're not going to feel good. And who forgets? Me.
Well, it's just when you're doing all this stuff and you were sick, right? You had COVID and you had a bad cough. So you were trying to get better by not running. Hopefully that would get it better. But yeah, you started to get stressed and anxious. And so it's actually Monday night. We're putting this out tomorrow, Tuesday. And I was really happy when I finished the race yesterday, but I have been limping around the house a bit today. Yeah, a little sore.
Because I didn't do anything for almost 2 weeks and then just ran a half marathon. My legs are saying, what the heck is going on around here?
Yeah.
So how about you, Sheila? What's going on with you?
Well, I got COVID this week.
Yes,
so
I'm sorry.
So that was, I couldn't work and I was housebound. So I actually got a lot done that needed to get done, just doing that really deep clean. I cleaned all the windows. I cleaned all the floors. I cut back all my gardens. And
it was shocking. I mean, it was shocking in a great way that you hardly had any symptoms at all.
Yeah. No, I didn't. I definitely didn't have the energy that I normally have, and my head hurt. But I didn't have a cough or anything like that. So that's good. But
so now what?
So now it's back to work, back to civilization, back to exercising. I'm going to slowly get into everything again. But I'm feeling much better. So
it is
good.
awkward. I mean, we should have been thinking about it this whole time because we hear about it, but you can't go to the store. You can't get the stuff you need to get.
Yeah. And it just all of a sudden hits you and you're kind of like, okay, well, hopefully I have enough food in the house and, make do with what we had. And we did fine because our son was away. So he came home from Wales yesterday. So that was good too, because it was good that he was away for the last 2 weeks because we both got COVID.
Yeah. And so for me, I've got a busy work week coming up. So that's kind of my main focus. So this week it's back to economic wellness and focusing on some jobs you got to get done and some work. And I'm hoping to have a very productive week.
Me too.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, have a great week, everyone. And we'll talk to you next time.
That is it for today's show. Please try and make wellness a priority.
You deserve it.
If you feel the need to talk to someone or ask for help, please do that.
Accept yourself for the person you are.
So long.
Adieu.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Goodbye.